everyone. I'm so excited to introduce you to today's guest. Michelle Reardon was named Head of Communications for the National Veterinary Associates, NVA, in June 2024. Michelle is an experienced senior communications executive who has worked in politics, government, academia, as well as Fortune 500 companies, providing strategic communications and counsel to some of the world's most iconic brands. She currently leads NVA's internal and external communications, which ranges from employee communications to media relations, external stakeholder communications, and so much more. But what she's recognized for is building really innovative programs, protecting brands, and continuing to develop and empower team members. Now, where Michelle and I had met was when she led communications at Campbell Soup Company, where she had various roles, and she was most recently the head of communications for the company's $4 billion snacks division. Before joining Campbell's, she spent a year with the Federal Reserve Bank in Philadelphia, as well as vice president communications for the Fed's third largest bank. She's done so many incredible things, and I'm so excited to pick her brain on what it means to empower the next generation of leaders, ensuring that brands are protected, ensuring that, we all take moments in our career and really understand what is that next step? How can we continue to create innovative approaches to leadership? Well, thank you so much for joining us. I so appreciate it.
Oh, Ashley, it is so fun to see you. I am so happy that we're able to hang out together. So thank you for inviting me.
Oh, of course, of course. And I was just trying to think back to when we first connected, and it's been a while.
It has been a while. Has it been over a year now?
It's been over a year, and there's been so many changes, even in your world, which I'm excited to get to. But
Yeah.
for those that don't know a lot about your background yet, you've had such an interesting career, and I'm excited for us to dive into it more. And that's really where I want to start.
Mm.
So that big question of, and I used to hate asking it this way, but sometimes it's the easiest word to ask. How did you get where you are right now? Like what did your career look
Yeah.
like? What was that
Yeah.
trajectory like?
I so I would say like the main thing that led me where I am is my mom and dad read the newspaper every morning and watched the TV every night. And that got me into current events. And I fell in love with them. Just didn't realize it at the time. And then when I went to college, I wanted to go and work for the Department of State. So I started working for a bunch of U.S. senators as unpaid internships, which I understand people don't do that anymore, but I highly encourage it. And one thing led to another, and I ended up not going to the Department of State because they had a hiring freeze at the time. But I did get a job straight out of college for a U.S. senator who went on to have a great career. So I worked for him. I worked for his campaign. And then when I went out to the campaign office, I was a volunteer coordinator. When I came back, I came into the press office. And I've never left media ever since then. So it's been a long, long time that I've done media relations. And I went from that to being a press secretary for a governor. And then I wanted to leave government and try industry out. So I went to an awesome company called DuPont, and I was there. I thought I'd be there for 10 years. I was there for 14 because I just loved it so much. And they taught me broad, right? In communications, you could do media relations your entire career, but they taught me strategy, crisis, employee comms, investor relations, sustainability comms, like all of it was, and it was a fantastic, and the topics were great. The scientists were amazing. And then I left that and I went to the Federal Reserve because why not, right? And I was the head of communications there. And then Campbell Soup called and asked if I'd come over and do communications work for them. So I was there for about 6 years. I started off on soup, and then within a year, they acquired a whole snacking portfolio. So I ended up the head of communications for Campbell Snacks. And I just left there this spring and went to a company called National Veterinary Associates, which is like a network of veterinary hospitals across the United States. It's a private company, and it's a company that hopes to go public. So I've never done a private company. I've never done veterinary care or health care. And I've never taken a company public. So the kind of theme in my career is I take communications and I apply it to different sectors of the economy and constantly push myself to learn new things. So this is the next big jump.
That's so exciting. And I guess I didn't realize this before, and I'm glad that we've brought it up now, is that early on you working in government, like
Mhm.
thinking about what that would have taught you, because I feel like that's one of the fields that not only is just so fast paced and changes daily, but you are dealing with so many different people and walks of life. So do you feel like the government, working in government, helped you with now, all of the different fields that you were in and are
Oh,
in?
for sure. I have a friend who said that, to be in communications, you should either be a former journalist or a former agency person. And I was neither. And it was one of the great loves of my career to change her mind
Mm,
and actually convince her that starting in government was actually, maybe even in this day and age, it might even be a better way to start, right? Because when you think about where communications, corporate communications, has gone in the last 2 decades or so, it's really gone into this realm of corporate affairs. So it's not just communications anymore, it's strategic counsel on things like current events, which
mm,
then really is government relations in many ways, or at least government communications, investor communications. There's
mm,
no such thing as one audience anymore because of, the technology that we're on now. Everyone is everywhere all the time. And so segmenting those audiences and thinking you're only speaking directly to them is gone. And you really do need to have that background. So, yeah, you're right. Government was, I literally had the state seal in the trunk of my car. I did, for one of the governors I work for, we did a news conference every day for her first 100 days. We had most of the things in our head. We wrote a sheet of paper, one sheet of paper, which was a news release. And we were working the phones from our cars, going from place to place, working with different people to try to shine a light on the things that were going right in the state and in the country, and then also trying to shine a light on programs we thought were new and good and helpful. And there are a lot of different people involved in all of those, right? From education to healthcare to crime to foreign policy, right? The topic changed every day. And sometimes we would do three a day, right? And the topic would, you'd have to go from talking about jobs to talking about in a school with kids to then, the next thing might be something completely different. It was a phenomenal way to learn because it was fast. You did have to have it in your head. And then the beauty of the next step going to industry was they made me put it all on paper.
mm.
I remember the first time they said, write me a communications plan. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. But I had it. It was in my head. Of course I had it. I just didn't know you wrote that stuff out.
Exactly. And I think too, like, you've had so many different leadership positions that have, you know, shifted and changed. I know that you were a director of communications for the Americas with Campbell Soup Company and then the VP communications. So being in so many different leadership roles across these different industries, can you talk about what maybe was the most surprising for you or just challenging aspect of being that type of leader in these different industries you've been in?
I mean, I think the industries are different, right? So I think a lot of times people say out loud, I love fast pace, I love rapid change. And then when you're in it, it may not be for you, right? And then some people who are like, I like the slower pace. And then you get in it and you're like, slower pace is not for me, right? So I think one of the things that I learned was each industry and sector I was in is very different. Each employer is very different. And that culture and the values that they have, those are critical, right? And they really, as you're interviewing to try to figure out what's next, to me, that's such an important piece of who you want to work for. Because I figured out pretty quickly in a career where I'm trying to sell you stories that I believe in, I have to believe in the story. It's just who I am. I'm not your spin person. I don't make things sexy. That's not what I do. I tell really good stories that I believe in based on what I've seen. Um, and I like to do it in a rather fast paced culture and climate. So that works for me. And honestly, slow does not work for me at all. It's really bad. Like, I'm like
Mhm.
trying to break walls down. So
Absolutely.
that was one. I think the other two, like on the positive side of it, is team. Man, I have had some of the greatest people I've worked with in my career, honestly. Like, I could name names, they know who they are. When you get on a team where you're working so closely with people, you know them, you know how they think, you know what their strengths are, and you play off of those. And it's not just a professional relationship; it becomes personal, and that's the greatest. Like, in the team I'm on now, they were just talking about the word joy. And I guess it is joy, but I think it's bigger than that. It's just fulfillment. It's like career fulfillment is when I'm on a team and we're doing something amazing together. It's not as much fun when you're doing it by yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think too, we talk a lot about how you are working with so many different people in these different industries and roles, and you're managing different people. And I think since COVID too, team building is something that can be, had been very, very difficult. And I think when you first joined um Campbell Soup Company, or during your time there, it was COVID. And so dealing with all of that made leading, internal and external communications being very, very difficult. But can you talk about how you've built strong teams? Because that's something that a lot of people always have questions on. They're either new to managing teams, or they have been, but things have shifted and changed. Uh,
Yeah.
how have you done that?
I think the first team that I built that was strong was by accident, but it kind of set the foundation for how I do it going forward. It's a two-step thing for me. One is I do really want people to feel comfortable to be personal on the team. So when I was working at DuPont, I led a global media relations team of 5. So it was me for the United States, one from Canada, Roger, Thali, who was Europe, Jejun in China, Krish in India, and Vivi in Brazil. And then we had one that was in the Midwest because that was also something we felt was very unique, and that's Jennifer. And you get them on the phone, and DuPont required every meeting to start with core values connect. So before you got into the business of the meeting, you had to have a core values contact. And their core values were safety, health, environment, respect for people, and highest ethical treatment. I have no idea how I can still remember that, other than they did a great job of instilling
Remember?
values.
Yeah.
I didn't run a team that was running safety, health, or environment really. So I always started my calls with respect for people. So we started every call with, tell us something about what's going on where you are today. Could be the weather, could be your kids, could be something culturally unique about China or India that we didn't know about, right? So we'd start with that. And honestly, within a couple of months, we were the best of friends. So I had twins when I was on that team. Well, actually, I'd had them and come back from mat leave to lead that team. So everyone knew Ben and Lily, and Ben and Lily knew everyone, right? So, and the reason is I put a map of the world in their bedroom, with little stickies on it that showed planes and trains and houses. And I would tell them stories for bedtime, like Jujun lives in China. He actually lives in Shanghai. Shanghai is this. Jujun told me this story today, right? And then I would tell the team what the kids thought about that, right? They became part of my world. That's step one. I think the second step was knowing each other's strengths and each other's weaknesses, right? Because if I tell you what my weakness is, then you can tell me what your strength is. And if you can fill my void, we've got a stronger team. And I think it was just those two things. And I've had, like I said, some of the best teams ever, and I'm building a new one now, and I'm really excited about it.
Absolutely. And it's like, being comfortable in saying, I am not good at this, or this is not one of my strongest areas is
Yeah.
important.
Oh, I mean, Ashley, you could talk about this forever, I'm sure. Like building teams and thinking through how to build strong teams. What's your perspective on it?
Mhm. It's so fascinating to me because I've seen teams just not operate effectively because people are not being honest with each other about what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, and what are things that they just are scared to do or scared to talk about. Like they're not honest with each other and there's not a good fit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I think it's huge when you can overcome that obstacle and you can have conversations with people because if you're in a leadership position, you want to have people around you that are smarter than you
Yeah.
and can navigate things and can say, I don't think you're doing this right, or here's maybe what I would do instead. But sometimes people are so afraid to have those conversations. And
Mm-hmm.
especially when we talk about intergenerational teams, there's always this hierarchy because of age, right?
Right.
And um, I always tell young people that they need to be honest and say, I need help with this. I'm not good at this. Can you teach me about it? Can you offer your advice or insight? And at the same time, the person that maybe is older, but in that other leadership role needs to say, I'm not good at this. Can you help me with this? Can we have a dialogue about it? Um,
Right.
that intergenerational piece, I don't think is talked about enough.
Oh, I totally agree with you. And I think it's scary, right? I think it's scary for people to admit that they might have a shortcoming, right?
Yes.
Their perceived shortcoming. I embrace the spaces where I'm not as strong. I learned it pretty early in my career. And it was one of those things where I was the youngest on the team and I was the badass, right? Like I'm placing news stories here and there, and all my stories are great. And I was so excited and winning all the time. And there was an older woman that worked on polymers, which is plastic, which is needed,
Mhm.
but not as fun as the topics that I got assigned, right? But one day we were working on something together, and she started drawing a picture of the story I was
Mhm.
telling. And I was like, holy cow, right? Like that just takes storytelling to a totally different dimension that I can't go to on my own. And fell in love with her that day and fell in love with the idea that like, here's another aperture that I can tell stories down. And I constantly look for that now. I'm constantly looking for people that know how to tell, like, how can you tell my 5 minute story in a TikTok, please?
Right, exactly. And that young people piece is what I'm so curious to ask you about because I'm sure you've had people along the way, whether they be interns or people just starting out, ask you for advice or insight. But I sort of want to flip that question and say, what are some of the maybe common mistakes that you see young professionals making when they're starting out? Or just things that they assume that they should be doing that maybe is not the best way to get ahead or to get that promotion or all of those things. What
Yeah.
do you see?
So I have one pet peeve, um, and I hope people don't mind it, but it is the telephone. I would love for young people to understand that old people like me love to talk to people live. I like to talk on the telephone. I am fine with FaceTiming. I'm great with one on ones face to face. Please don't email me everything that you're thinking all the time, right? I can't tell you how many of them rely on email to get things done. Where for me, I started off in media relations, which literally the word relations is really important. I'm not calling it public relations, I'm calling it media relations intentionally. My job was to call reporters and have a relationship with them such that when I had a story that I needed to share with them, they trusted me to give them that story accurately, right? And if they had questions, they knew to the best of my ability I was going to get them the answers. That was on the phone all the time because we didn't rely on emails at that time. Like when I started in my career, we faxed news releases. It's that long ago, right? But as the world evolved, all of a sudden you email news releases out to 100 reporters and you're like, I did it. Now I'm just waiting for the placements. I'm like, that's the beginning of the journey here. That's not relations. That's your push. Where's the pull? Right. So that's one area I think that is a good opportunity. The second is, I think, the compensation side of your career comes right. And I like people to have intention. I love for folks that are new to tell me so clearly where they want to go and who they want to be and their career development. I'm just as happy with people that just don't know, and I can help them figure that out. But it frustrates me when someone comes in and they've been doing work for 6 months and it's the work they promised me they'd do and they did it, and then they come in and say, now I need a raise. And I'm like, but you, I mean, like,
Right.
where's push me?
Mm-hmm.
Like, push me, tell me your strategy. Don't just do what you agreed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Push yourself,
Mm-hmm.
push me, push the team, right? When you start demonstrating that you've got the ability to work well with others, to grow stories bigger, to grow down multiple channels, and to build your own stories that you came up with because they fit the objective, there you are,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now let's promote the heck out of you.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you mentioned the thing about email, because when I would try to reach out to different, leaders here in Pittsburgh and, send them notes and say, I'd really love the opportunity to connect with you. Sometimes they were surprised because when I would want to meet in person for coffee, I wasn't like doing this. Like I wasn't on my phone. I was like looking at them in the eye and talking with them and really having those intense conversations. And there's this assumption that, people would be texting or like not communicate. But that's what I'm trying to teach all of the kids that we work with too, is like, hey, you need to gain these skills looking people in the eye. And, when we talk about even playing chess, one of the things is knowing the opponent that's in front of you, right? Understanding their body language. That's so
So
important.
true.
It's so important, and I think that needs to be talked about for students. I'm so glad you mentioned that relations piece, because you can't just email and expect to get the
Yeah.
response.
I had a colleague once that I was working with. She's from a UK based company, and we were working on a really big project. And I called for a strategy meeting in Washington, D.C., and I wanted everyone to kind of come in for a day and a half. And she called me and she's like, I'm coming in. I'm going to take the red eye. I'm going to get in there. And then I'm going to stay for the day. And then at 6 o'clock at night, I'm going to get on a flight and go back. And I was like, why are you doing this? And she said, it is so important to me when I work on projects that I meet people face to face. I can learn so much more. I know who you are. I know your motivations. I understand what you're trying to achieve. And I know better how to work with you just by being in a room with you for a couple of hours. She had a young daughter and she didn't want to miss bedtime. And so she missed bedtime, but was there in the morning for breakfast. And that was the most important thing to her. And it's, that was so long ago. It stayed with me always, like that personal. And even during COVID, like Ashley, you and I met through email, and then we've done a couple of Zoom calls and Teams calls together, right? We've not met face to face yet, but I feel like I know you better just because of these calls that we've done,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
If we had done them by email, I don't know if we would have built trust together quickly.
Exactly. Because even just the tones of emails, right?
Yeah.
It's so different than knowing what somebody's actually saying and
Yeah.
how they mean it.
Yeah. And I mean, I can't say that I speak for all old people, but I'll say I'll respond to blank, like brand new emails of people that are just cold calling, emailing me. I'll set up time on Fridays and I'll do like two or three of them that sound interesting to me. Sometimes when I have enough time on Fridays, that's the thing I like to do. But I don't do it Monday through Thursday. I only do it on Fridays, and it's only if you've actually really piqued my interest that I'll actually respond to a cold email.
Absolutely. And I'm just curious, in that cold email, what sort of sparks your interest? Is it the person really like you feel like there's that personal touch, like they wanted to reach out to you directly and know your background, or what was it about the email that would spark
Yeah,
your
it's funny. A lot of times those scare me, like
interest?
real creepy.
Yeah. Right. I could see that. You're like, oh, how did you know about me?
Damn LinkedIn.
So true.
Um, no, it's usually a place where I'm trying to push myself or my team to learn more. So like um, I took a cold call like a couple weeks ago from a vendor who's got this bot platform that integrates in with Microsoft. And it basically solves some of the shortcomings in Microsoft that allows me, like as a communicator, one of the things I love is channels. And I want to be really intentional about the channel I'm reaching you on. And I hate the fact that in employee comms, most often I'm reaching you by email. What if it's really, really important? I want to IM everyone. I want to be able to hit 3,500 people with an instant message in Teams because it's important, right? Like if a CEO changed or a CFO changed or, something like that, I want to be able to get you. And right now I can't do that, right? So, but this vendor was talking to me about an ability. So it's usually that type of thing, like capabilities, professional development, areas I'm not as familiar with that I want to learn more about. That's how they get me.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And I hope people listening remember that if they want to reach out and
And
connect
to
with
be
you.
honest, Ashley, like let's talk about you and I for a second, because the reason that you and I started talking is chess.
Yes.
I had absolutely fallen in love with chess. I'd watched Queen's Gambit, then I started reading all sorts of books and watching videos about the world of chess, and I thought it was fascinating. And I don't have a strategic mind like a chess player does. I don't think at all. I think I'm strategic, but not like you. And I was fascinated by the fact that you were bringing chess to kids, but you were
Mhm.
also bringing chess to industry and figuring out all these different ways to apply it in the world. Completely got me.
Mhm. Thank you. And I feel like too, it was like I had we like I knew that I wanted to connect with you as well because I had the interest in communications and in government and because that was my major. And so it was like knowing that at least about you, but also knowing that, hey, I think this is how we could have a conversation or how it could fit in. Like there was the purpose. Like I had the reason that I wanted to connect, but then also like here's really the purpose of it too. And sometimes I feel like people just reach out and they're like, hi, I really want to meet you. And then they
Right.
don't give, well, okay, but like what's the goal of that conversation? Like what do we want out of it? And I think sometimes people are afraid to say what they want out of it.
And to have like a margin of what you want to get out of it, right? I want to get this or something in between, right? Because I feel like in many instances that's how it works out too. Like
Absolutely.
ideally I'd love this. I'm going to settle for the mandatory minimum here, but like can we dance in this space together?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that actually has me really curious about this next question for you in terms of your mentors,
Mm,
because I feel like everyone has that person in their life who has had tons of influence on them. So
yeah.
I'm curious, maybe who has been one of your mentors, or even if it's not a mentor, like a piece of advice somebody gave you that helped you.
So many really good pieces of advice. My first official mentor was assigned to me at DuPont. And it's because I'd started my career in government and then gone into industry as a media relations person, where I was just doing media relations for a long time, without really having to do anything else for them. Um, During professional development season, this one woman raised her hand and was like, we need to actually develop Michelle more broadly. And I want to pick her up as a mentor and I want to put her on my team and I want to help coach her on how to broaden into employee comms. And it was probably the best thing in the world for a couple different reasons. One is Lori is by far one of the most graceful, elegant, poised executive female communicators I've ever met. And style's a big deal in what we all do. And I rebel against it by nature. And it's important. I think if you're trying to influence people, like there are there's a way that she would talk where, and mine was like a harder sell. And so she taught me how to soften that up a little bit, which I think is so critical. And then I'll be honest, like the first conversation we had, she's like, I'm bringing you on the employee comms team. You're still going to have the media relations beat, but you're going to take on special assignments in employee comms. And I'm like, cool. Can I say not interested? Because I'm not interested. And she's like, no, you can't. But we knew you wouldn't be interested. And that's why you're doing this, right? And she's like, the world doesn't revolve around media relations. And at the time, I was like, yes, it does. Like the most important things happen in the news. Well, look at us today. If she hadn't reached out to me, if she hadn't decided that she wanted to mentor me, if I hadn't grown capability, media relations is insanely hard to have a singular career in right now. And employee communications through COVID was the single most important thing we could do. If I hadn't learned how to do that, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I owe it to her for seeing that I was a stubborn, proud, early 30 something who really needed to see things in a different perspective. And she took that on.
Yeah, it's always seeing something in a new perspective because we can look at things for so long or think that one way is the true way we want to go, but then just somebody saying something a little bit differently, it helps us rethink that and say, oh, maybe I should do something else. Maybe I should pivot this way. That can be so important.
I think that, yeah, I think there's as and I don't know if it's men and women or just women, but I know for me personally, as I grew my confidence in myself, I also grew pride at the same time. And that was one of the things that she kind of coached me on, right? My pride actually was getting in the way of my career.
Mm. Oh, absolutely.
Right. And it's not like it's a blessing and it's an advantage and a disadvantage, I think, right? It's an opportunity area because I can be I'm so good at convincing people of things that she used to say, you sound like you know what you're talking about every time you talk, and you don't know what you're talking about every time you talk. I'm like, but I'm fairly certain I'm right. And she's like, well, until you're 100% certain, please don't say it with that tone. And I was like, it's so important though, right? Because as women and as we kind of grow this, like I have to come across like I am an expert in my field, right? And I think it's so important to have that expertise, but to have an approach that is warm in the room, not punching people in the face.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And would you say that would be, in your experience, piece of advice for, especially, I want to focus on young women because I think that in all of these industries, and correct me if I'm wrong, but and most of them are very, of course, male dominated. But I feel like when you look at, different corporations or structures, and especially in politics too, it's very male dominated. So, what advice would you have for young women, especially in communications, going into these fields and navigating that, but also looking to get ahead in their career, move forward in different ways?
Um, so I'm a work hard person. I'm a bit of like we joke, I'm a workaholic. I'm a recovering workaholic. Um, I do still think that for women, it is important to love what you do and do it, right? Like get in there and do it. Um, build I think communications is such a great framework for career because you can use the same template you use for a communications plan for your career plan. What's your objective? Who are your audiences? What's the goal of where you want to go? What are the key messages or the key tactics you need to actually drive that, right? So much of it is that. And I think most recently, I had a former boss I was talking to early this summer, and she said to me, she's a phenomenal female executive. You actually know her, Ashley. It's Val, who you, right? And Val said to me, steer the next step. You steer the next step. And I was like, that's everything, right? If you think about it that way with that intention every day, you sit down and you're thinking about where are you going? Why are you going there? How are you driving it? That's everything.
Mm.
It's hanging on my wall now.
Oh, I love that. Oh, I love that. That's so true. So true. And I think this that really fits in nicely into this last question I have with you because it's my favorite question to ask. And most people get scared to answer this because it's not a common question that they get every day. And I think because I'm using the term queen in this question, sometimes when I ask men this question, they feel a little awkward because they're like, "Oh, well, I'm a king," and my whole point is, well, think about what the queen is and how powerful the queen is, and anyone can be a queen. But in your world, what does unleashing your inner queen mean to you? And then I want you to talk about how you unleash your inner queen every day.
Hmm, that's a good. Those are two really good ones.
Mhm.
Um, it has always been about career and family and community, um, and not in that order. It started off as community, and government service was just that, right? I really wanted to improve the lives of people, and I felt like you could do that really through communications, through storytelling. Um, my family's everything. I know people talk about work life balance, and there is none, there is whatever. I had a really good boss once who had to answer that question all the time because she was one of few female CEOs. And she said, you define it. You define what your work life balance is for you every single day. And today may be different than tomorrow or the day after, but you define it. And that's how you get your balance. And so, very early on, I've always, especially with twins, had to balance, but tried really hard not to skip or miss a moment in their lives and to be very present when they're there, no matter how exhausted I am. And I was exhausted in the early days. They're easier now. And then career, I think I've followed this path of taking communications, learning what you can from an industry, and then moving on and applying it to somewhere else. It gets harder and harder as you get older to learn new things. You get tired faster. But it has been probably my favorite part of my career is that I've been able to do that. Um, how I apply my inner queen every day, I think it's, you talked about this in a podcast, Ashley. It really starts when you wake up, right? And the intention that you set for yourself for that day, for your day, right? My mornings are a little different than yours. I like to start off most of the time with beating the heck out of myself working out for some insane workout thing where I'm really sore the next day, but I love it. And then I love being able to go outside. I've got a pond and I feed the fish, and then I come inside and then I go get ready for to start my work day. I think that your inner queen is that intention, right? Like if you bring that intention to your day every day, even if your intention is to sit still all day long for a day and do nothing on the couch, enjoy it, be present for it, you know? And I think the last thing about the queen piece that I think you remind me of every time we talk, I think queens are a little sassy. And I think that that's okay.
I love it. Oh, I love that so much. I love it so much. I want to thank you for, taking the time, number one, for, your insight, feedback, but also for the support that and insight that you provide every time that we talk. I really appreciate it.
Well, likewise. I mean, we didn't spend as much time with you helping me learn more about what you're doing on this, but you should definitely take the advantage of this podcast to tell people more about what you do, because the work you're doing is amazing. And
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm just so excited for what you're doing next. And I think my maybe one last just question for you is that now that you're working in really animal space, right?
Mhm.
What pets do you have?
Yeah, so that's part of why I took the job is I actually have no pets right now for the first time in 30 years.
Mm.
So this past spring, our last pet, I guess she crossed the rainbow bridge, is what people say, right? So we adopted a cat when my husband and I were like, we just got engaged. Then we got a dog. Then we got another cat. So we had had three pets for 30 years. And this is the first time that we're without. So the thing that I love about working in vet care is learning so much more about the health care that's available to pets now. I mean, the things we can do to prolong, like to make them have longer, happier lives is amazing. I mean, animal care is catching up now to human health care as far as capabilities. Like CT scans, chemotherapy, it's amazing what they can, kidney dialysis, it's amazing what they can do for animals. And the people. Ashley, the people that work in the veterinary care industry, most of them start off when knowing they want to be veterinarians somewhere between the age of 7 and 9, and then they go and they do it. And 84% of them are women.
Oh,
And they have the biggest hearts in the world.
mm, it's amazing. And we'll make sure to link info about you and your role so people can continue to learn more because it's just
Awesome.
fascinating. But I want to thank you so much for your time and your insight, and I really appreciate you spending this with us.
Oh, thank you so much again for inviting me. It's so good to see you, too.
You too. Thank you so much.